Ever since October 7th, the topic we have covered more than any other by a decent distance on this show is the ongoing war that is carried out by Israel against a largely helpless population in Gaza. Whatever you think of the original justification for the invasion and the attack itself, this is not really a war in any classical or traditional sense. It's not any combat between two militaries the way, say, is happening in Ukraine and happens in most combat and theaters that we refer to as a war. This is really an attack by a country with one of the most sophisticated militaries in the world, backed by the world's largest superpower, Israel and the United States, that is bombing and invading and shooting and shelling and blockading a population that is almost entirely civilian and that has no real military to speak of. They had very primitive rockets that they aimlessly have shot into Israel as a protest against the two-decade blockade. They obviously have some guns and some other small munitions, but they have no military to speak of. And as a result, it's not any kind of a real war. It's a massacre. It's a very one-sided conflict. And one of the things that happened very early on in the war was that the Israeli government at the highest level, in fact, its defense minister, Yoav Gallant, said what Israel's plan would be for the war. One of the weapons they intended to use against the Palestinian people, not against Hamas, but against all of Gaza, which was a full-scale blockade where they would deliberately exclude food, water, electricity, or fuel from entering Gaza. They didn't say, we're not going to provide them with fuel and water and food. They said, we're going to block all of Gaza from getting from any source, from other countries, from international aid organizations, food and water. And he said it on video, and everybody can listen to it, and we're about to listen to it right now. Here is the Israeli defense minister on October 9th, 2023, talking about what one of the tactics of their war would be. I have ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we act accordingly. So they made no secret of the fact that that was their goal, that that was their intention. Now, obviously, after 6 months, when you have doctors and nurses from around the world, not just from Gaza, but from Europe and North America and South America and Asia, having been based in Gaza, going to Gaza to try and provide health care, and they have firsthand accounts of babies and young children and adults dying of hunger, mass famine throughout Gaza, a population of 2.2 million people, half of whom are children. That's 1.1 million children, people under the age of 18. They have all kinds of Western healthcare providers and aid organizations documenting that in nurseries, the babies are too malnourished even to cry. They often die immediately after birth, or they die stillborn because they're not getting enough nutrition. There are 3 and 4 and 5-year-old children who are simply wasting away, who are completely emaciated, and who are dying simply of hunger because there is no way to get food into Gaza, even though many aid organizations and countries are trying. And that's because, in large part, Israel is making good on what they said they would do, which was prevent food from getting into Gaza. Here from The Guardian today, yet another report has been issued, this one by the World Bank. Quote, World Bank report finds imminent risk of catastrophic famine in the Gaza Strip. Findings come as the UN General Secretary calls on Israel to give unconditional access to Gaza for aid relief. Everyone all over the world knows exactly why there's famine in Gaza. It's because the Israelis are blocking trucks from getting in. You can interview the drivers of these trucks. You can interview the organizations sending them. And they will say the Israelis keep them out for hours and days at a time. What they do let in is a tiny little fraction of what's necessary for the sustenance of the population. There's no doubt in anyone's mind, except in the minds of a sector of Israel supporters in the United States who deny fault automatically in every instance when it comes to Israel, why this is happening. It's because Israel is using famine and war and hunger and starvation as a weapon of war. Here from The Guardian, quote, half the population of the Gaza Strip is at imminent risk of famine as food shortages approach catastrophic levels for more than 1 million people, the World Bank has warned. The bank's regular update found that of Gaza's population of 2.3 million, there were 1.1 million in the highest risk category, people in catastrophe, which meant risk of acute malnutrition or death. A further 854,000 people, 38% of the population, were in the next category down, people in emergency, where immediate action is needed to save their lives. The remaining 12% were in the third category, people in crisis. Nobody in Gaza, not a single human being, was placed in the bottom two categories. People merely stressed or people in food who are food insecure. Quote, household surveys, people who have food security. Not one person in Gaza is in the two best categories. Quote, household surveys reveal alarming trends with virtually all households skipping meals daily and a significant portion of children under 2 suffering from acute malnutrition, the report said. The World Bank said the projected famine could happen at any time between now and late May, and conditions were being exacerbated by a number of factors, including relentless hostilities, meaning Israel's war in Gaza, widespread damage to infrastructure, and restricted humanitarian access, hindering the delivery of essential supplies and services. Now, you notice that a lot of Western media accounts like The Guardian write these reports, and so does the World Bank, to exclude any active agent. They say famine is happening. Humanitarian aid is being blocked. They write it on purpose to prevent affirmative declarative statements that Israel is deliberately causing it, but there's no question that that is what's happening. First of all, Israel is the party that is in charge of all of Gaza. Hamas does not govern Gaza and has not since October 8th, when Israel started bombing and then Israel invaded. Certainly hasn't for many months. The governing body of Gaza is Israel. It determines who and what gets in and out. It determines who goes where and what goes where. Obviously, there are still Hamas forces fighting against the invading Israeli army on their soil, but what happens in Gaza is determined by the Israelis. So if there's famine in Gaza, if there are blockades of convoys from getting in and out, it's only one reason. It's only one party that governs Gaza. It's not Hamas, it's Israel. Secondly, there was no mass famine in Gaza prior to the Israeli invasion. So trying to blame Hamas for a famine that did not happen until the Israelis arrived is obviously irrational. Thirdly, the Israelis have explicitly said that they intended to use that as a weapon of war. And then fourth, there are endless reports of Israelis blocking aid to Gaza on the grounds that they want the population to starve. Here is France 24 in February of 2024, just last month. Here you see the headline, Israeli protesters block aid convoys bound for Gaza. Quote, you might say it's not acceptable to block food and water going in, said one protester, David Rudman, at the Nitzana border post between Israel and Egypt. Quote, but given the situation we're in, it's acceptable, he argued, as the Gaza war, siege, and hostage crisis have continued into the 5th month. Here from the Washington Post, also in February, quote, young Israelis block aid to Gaza while IDF soldiers stand and watch. Quote, it's approaching 1 a.m. Yosef DeBresser, 22, is in the thick of planning. He taps out a WhatsApp message to rally more. Quote, we sleep tonight in Kerem Shalom and block aid and fuel to Hamas. Do you want to sleep here with us? Shuttles are running throughout the night and day. Before Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th and the war that ensued, Kerem Shalom was the main commercial crossing between Israel and Gaza. Today, it's one of just 2 entry points for life-saving food and medicine to the besieged enclave, where aid agencies say civilians are on the brink of famine. But DeBresser and his 3 companions, Israelis, are determined to keep any trucks from getting through. And they aren't bothered if innocents suffer. Quote, war is war, DeBresser shrugs. The United States didn't care about civilians when it blew up Hiroshima and Nagasaki, who gives his enemy aid. Now again, no one's asking these Israelis to give aid, food, water, electricity to the Palestinians. The world is saying that Israel should stop blocking others from wanting to give them food and water. And yet Israel is defying the entire world, as it often does, defying the United States, which is paying for its war, providing its weapons and arms that it uses to destroy Gaza, to the point that the United States now actually has to humiliate itself by trying to airdrop aid into Gaza through parachutes because their allies, the Israelis, whose war the United States is paying for and arming, refuses to let even the United States, their main patron, bring aid into Gaza, into the population. And the United States is reduced to airdropping aid to the Gazans because they're not allowed to bring aid in directly to Palestinians. Now, one of the things that I think is so important to note, because I see all the time now, Democrats in the United States decrying what Israel is doing, denouncing what Israel is doing, calling Netanyahu all sorts of names. There's often an attempt, I see this all the time from especially more left liberal members of the Democratic Party. When they finally now are willing to denounce Israel, they try and turn it into a left-right issue by emphasizing that this is the fault of the right-wing Israeli government, as though there's some sort of alternative waiting in the wings that would come in and end the war, when in reality, virtually the entire Israeli population is united in support of this war. There is no alternative, some nice center-left alternative to Netanyahu. In fact, Netanyahu's primary opposition, the mainstream parties in Israel that are Netanyahu's oppositions, joined his war cabinet and continue to remain there. And what they're really doing when they say these things, oh, Netanyahu is evil, Netanyahu is bad, the far-right government of Israel, is they are deliberately obscuring the responsibility for this war that actually rests with the President of the United States, Joe Biden. They're playing a sick political game, and it includes Democrats like Bernie Sanders and AOC. Bernie Sanders, actually, at the start of the war, defended Israel, went on Face the Nation and said, of course I'm opposed to a ceasefire. How do you have a ceasefire when you have to destroy Hamas? And AIPAC publicly thanked him for it. And now they know that they need to assuage the angry left wing of their party, the people who are on the left but still vote for Democrats. You can question whether they really are leftist or not, but the left wing of the Democratic Party that is angry about this war, they want to hear people like Bernie Sanders and AOC and other Democrats denouncing the war, even though when doing so, they don't actually put blame on the person who's responsible, which is Joe Biden. And the fact that Joe Biden is responsible for the war in Israel is obviously demonstrated by the fact that the United States, under Biden's leadership, is paying for Israel's war, not just through the $4 billion a year that Israel gets every year in American aid, as a result of an aid package that Barack Obama and Joe Biden negotiated and finalized with Benjamin Netanyahu as one of the last acts the Obama administration performed. That was in September of 2016, when they agreed to a record-setting $38 billion deal for American taxpayers to transfer to Israel over 10 years. Much of which has to be spent by buying weapons from Americans' arms dealers, so American elites who own major stock in arms in the arms industry also benefit. But much of that money doesn't have to be spent on that at all. It's just aid to Israel that they can spend how they want at a time when there are millions of Israelis with a higher standard of living than millions of Americans have. But on top of that, $4 billion every year in aid, every time Israel has a new war with its neighbor, with one of its neighbors, it asks the United States to pay for it and to provide the bombs and the weapons to it that it wants to use to bomb their neighbors. And the United States, in each and every instance, provides that. Joe Biden ran to Benjamin Netanyahu almost immediately after October 7th, and very consistent with Biden's decades-long behavior as being one of Israel's most stalwart defenders, he promised that America would pay for Israel's war, would pay for it, would arm it, above and beyond the $4 billion that we sent to them each year. He immediately demanded $14 billion from Congress for war funding for Israel to pay for its war. And Israeli military officials openly admit that the only reason they're able to carry out this war is because of Joe Biden, because Joe Biden's paying for it, because Joe Biden is arming it. Without that, they would not be able to carry out this war. Here from the Jewish News Syndicate in late November, the headline, "Biden is the primary obstacle to Israeli victory." They're saying that the that somehow Joe Biden is the obstacle to Israeli victory, and yet within the article it says this, quote, Israel's dependence on the United States was stated bluntly by retired IDF Major General Yitzhak Brick in an interview earlier this week. This is what General Brick said, quote, all of our missiles, the ammunition, the precision-guided bombs, the airplanes and bombs, it's all from the United States. Everything that the Israelis are using to bomb Gaza, to destroy its civilian infrastructure, 70% of residential buildings in Gaza are either destroyed or crippled. The water system, the sewage system are irreparably damaged, if not destroyed. Even when, at some point when the war ends, there's, as Jared Kushner said this week, when asked whether or not he thinks that what would happen once the war ends, he basically said, who cares? You can move the Palestinians out of Gaza. You can build really expensive real estate on the sea with really nice water views. He's like, but it really doesn't matter if you let the Palestinians go back or not, because there's basically nothing of Gaza left. And at least about that, Jared Kushner is right. The Israelis, with the aid of the United States, the crucial aid of the United States, have destroyed Gaza, but all of the weapons that they've used have been provided by the United States. The general went on, quote, the minute they turn off the tap, you can't keep fighting. You have no capability. Everyone understands that we can't fight this war without the United States, period. Now, in the United States, a lot of Democrats who understand that Joe Biden's support for the war in Gaza is a real political risk for him, try and convince Americans that, actually, he's doing so much to pressure Netanyahu. He's doing so much to restrain the Israelis. They constantly leak to Politico and places like it, to rags that are like Politico that just anonymously quote any White House official that wants to be quoted anonymously. Oh, Biden is fed up with Netanyahu. He's so frustrated with Netanyahu. He's so angry with him. And of course, the leverage rests entirely with Joe Biden in the United States, because without the United States providing weapons and money, this war could not be fought. And that's not my saying that. That's a top-level retired IDF general saying that. In fact, he said the minute they turn off the tap, meaning the minute the United States says we're not going to keep paying for your war, you can't keep fighting. We have no capability. Everyone understands that we can't fight this war without the United States. Everyone understands that we can't fight this war without the United States. I think when he says everyone understands, he doesn't realize that there are a lot of Israel supporters in the United States. I don't think he realizes how propagandized they are, who believe, oh, Joe Biden's not really doing anything for Israel. Israel could easily fight this war on its own. They could not fight this war on their own. They don't have the capabilities to fight the war on its own. They need the United States to do so. And the only reason it's going on for 6 months is because you have the United States, the richest and most powerful country in the world, standing behind Israel, continuously saying, up till today, that not only will the U.S. continue to finance and arm Israel's war, but will do so with no conditions of any kind. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.